Hi, I'm Jason Nichols, and I'm on the left.
And I'm Vince Coglianese, and I'm on the right. And if we can't find common ground in this world today,
then we're all just travelers.
Passing each other in an international airport.
In this great American experiment,
we'll be relegated to the trash bin of history.
So let's come together.
To debate without yelling. And let's save this nation. A provocative look back at the 2020 election ahead on Vince and Jason Save the Nation. Vince and Jason Save the Nation is brought to you by Goldco. To all of our listeners with an IRA, a 401k, or other retirement savings, have you seen the headlines today? Our federal debt has now reached over $30 trillion. What the federal government is not saying is that the Fed is running out of ways to fight our growing debt bomb. Inflation and tax hikes may be their only way out. We all dodged a bullet when Senator Joe Manchin announced that he wouldn't support the Democrats' crazy Build Back Better plan. But the truth is, the Democrats may not give up so easily. That is not good news for hardworking American taxpayers. Whatever the Democrats do in 2022 may mean even more and higher inflation. The more the dollar comes under attack, the more physical gold and silver could protect your money. So if you have over $50,000 or more in your retirement savings, your money could be at risk. Learn how you can protect your life savings with physical gold and silver. Call 855-948-1605 to receive your wealth protection kit. That's right, call 855-948-1605, and Goldco may give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open a qualified account. That's why Goldco is the only company we recommend for gold and silver. Goldco is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, a 5-time Inc. winner, and has countless 5-star reviews. So, what are you waiting for? Call 855-948-1605. That's 855-948-1605. Call Goldco and get started today.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Vince and Jason Save the Nation. I'm Dr. Jason Nichols. I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Vince Coglianese, and we've got a special guest and a special look at an upcoming film that I think is really interesting. Vince, who do we have with us?
Joining us today is a conservative filmmaker, Dinesh D'Souza, writer, director. You know him from so many of his films, and he's got a brand new one coming out that looks back at the 2020 election. It's called 2,000 Mules. For more on what that means, we turn to our guest, Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh, great to have you with us, sir.
Thank you. Terrific to be with you. I'm very excited about this film coming out next week. It's, we're living in an age of censorship. So this film is coming out in a kind of a novel way. You can't see it the way you could see my normal films by going to Apple, iTunes, or Amazon Prime. But nevertheless, we have put the film on uncancelable platforms. Let's put it that way.
Yes, including at your website, that's 2000mules.com. Can you explain for us what that means? Both Jason and I have seen the movie. Thank you for sending us a copy of it so we could take a look at this thing. You talk about it in the film. What does it mean, 2,000 mules?
Right. So a mule, the term, of course, kind of comes out of drug trafficking or sex trafficking. A mule is a kind of go-between. And here we're talking about ballot trafficking. And ballot trafficking is when you have a paid political operative, that's the mule. And what the mule is doing is taking illegal or fraudulent votes and dropping them en masse in mail-in drop boxes. And we have two separate lines of investigation. One is geo-tracking, which is the tracking of the movement of cell phones. You can kind of see these mules do it by watching their cell phones move from Dropbox to Dropbox to Dropbox. And the other line of evidence is video. And by video, I'm talking about the official surveillance video of the states themselves. So when you put those two together, you get a pretty clear picture of this mule operation, which is occurring in all the 5 key swing states.
So the 2,000 number that you arrived at, in the film you explain that that's based on drilling down to the people who visit the most drop boxes and who also happen to have contact with some nonprofit organizations. Although in the film, I don't think you name the nonprofit groups. I could be wrong.
We don't.
And then you also show the surveillance footage that pairs up with these cell phones, right? Can you give us the numbers on how you decided on the 2,000?
Yeah, it's literally a very simple math. There were about 240 mules in Atlanta, about 200 in Arizona, about 100 in Michigan, 1,100 in Philadelphia, and then I forget how many in Wisconsin. That's in the movie, of course. You just add up the number and you're over 2,000. So that's where we get the 2,000 mules. But remember that these are mules who went to 10 or more drop boxes. They're the most hardworking or industrious mules. The moment you change the search algorithm and drop it to say 5 drop boxes, a whole bunch of other mules pops up. So the 2,000 mules is a ridiculous undercount of the actual number of mules.
So I just wanted to, well, first of all, as a filmmaker, I'll congratulate you on the film. I really enjoyed just the texture and the lighting. And I mean this as a compliment. It felt like an episode of CSI, So I actually,
honestly, that means a lot. Thank you. Because I pride myself on making good films, not just on unfurling information, but telling it in a compelling way. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I did think that the film had a couple of specious leaps in it. Now, first of all, I do think it's important for our audience to know that in Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, and Michigan, specific people can collect ballots. And in Wisconsin, it's unspecified in the law. And in Pennsylvania, it has to be chosen by the voter. So in a lot of those cases, not these people that you're calling mules, and you made the reference to drug mules, which is an illegal practice, some of this is actually legal, correct?
Wrong. Here's the point. You're talking about vote harvesting, and there's actually a subtle but critical difference between vote harvesting and ballot trafficking. Now, there are about 26 states in the country that allow some form of vote harvesting. California, for example, allows you or me to give our ballot to anyone and say, hey, you go drop it off, and that's allowed. Now, in the states that we're looking at, vote harvesting is much more restricted. So let's look at Georgia. If you look at the Georgia law, it's very clear. You can give your ballot to a family member, or you can give your ballot, if you're in a caregiver facility, you can give your ballot to a caregiver. But the point I want to make is once you pay a mule, once money enters into the ballot delivery process, the vote is automatically corrupted, and that is illegal in all 50 states. In California, if I were to say to you, go drop off my vote and I'm going to pay you $50 to do it, that's a fraudulent vote that cannot be counted. So what we're describing in the movie, all those mules, all that balloting is illegal.
Right. So that was, I think, one of the things that I didn't think, and Vince, maybe you can, maybe you had a different view of it, but when I saw it, I didn't feel like the money connection was strongly established. Now, you mentioned people like Mark Zuckerberg, possibly being behind funding this. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I'm not implying, I mean, we want to be really clear here, because what we're doing in the movie is we're sort of working our way backward, right? We're starting with the mail-in drop box. We're saying, where did these mules get their ballots? Well, they seem to have got them from these left-wing organizations. Now, by the way, True the Vote, the research organization that did this work, they have a list of all these organizations. I've seen them. We didn't put them in the movie in part because it's movies can only do so much. But True the Vote is happy to turn over that list to the FBI or to the authorities. I think
that's really important, though, to establish the money part, because as you said, ballot collection is actually legal in a lot of these states. So the money element is the important one. Well, and that's where I think you were lacking when you're talking about Mark Zuckerberg and the SEIU.
You're talking, we're confusing two different types of money. No one denies that the mules are being paid. We have whistleblowers who said that they got $10 a ballot. We have mules who are taking photos of themselves as they drop the ballots in. By the way, not selfies, not one of those I voted photos, but they're taking photos of the ballots going into the drop box. Now think about it. Who does that? Who takes photos of themselves putting in 5 or 10 ballots into a drop box? I think when you see the movie, you begin to get the clear sense that what's going on is not only illegal, but it's criminal.
That part. Okay. That part, I agree.
Vince.
That part I agree, Dinesh. Very, very suspicious. It's very strange to take a picture of the box and not the selfie where people are proud they voted, that kind of thing. But Here's the thing, and
but not established. That's my
that's
thing.
right. Not
you
proven.
know. I think it's fine to say, okay, this looks suspicious.
Yes.
But to you know, at the end of the film, and I don't want to give the film away, but at the end of the film, Dinesh is clear this election was stolen. Now again, and I just want to say really quickly that you mentioned the True the Vote people, and I believe Catherine Engelbrecht. I hope I said her name correctly in the film, but she actually is quoted as saying there's no way to know who these votes were cast for, as did Seb Gorka actually said it in the film as well. So we don't actually know that this was some Democrat conspiracy, and a lot of what you named in the film, you actually were talking about Republicans who were committed these acts, like in the 9th District of Georgia, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And in a couple other cases that I could probably name, Miami-Dade, where they were switching people's party affiliation and going after the vulnerable people who spoke English as a second language. I think that it's just not, it doesn't have the smoking gun that it claims to have. That was my issue with it. And I think, just as a critique, Dinesh, just real quick, and I'm sorry, Vince, I know I'm kind of taking up your time, but just as a critique, I think if you had framed this film as this is about democracy, this is about fairness of elections, not about this is the Democrats stealing elections, maybe people like me could have been swayed like, hey, maybe we need to shore up certain things with our election laws. Maybe there are things that need to be done, but you made it a finger pointing exercise without really clearly establishing some of these links that you claim to have. And that was my issue with the film. Sorry, Vince, I just had to get that out.
I'll let Dinesh respond to you first, and then I want to get into some of these points.
Yeah, you've raised so many issues, I'm a little unsure where to begin, but look, we do trace a money trail in the film, money flowing to nonprofit groups coming from left-wing donors, billionaires, foundations, and so on. Here's the point. Nonprofit groups, many of them, by the way, 501c3 organizations, are forbidden by law from engaging in explicit electioneering. They can, in a generic sense, sort of exhort people to vote, but you can't run a partisan vote collection operation for any particular candidate or party. Now, what is the way? I can't think of a way that 400,000 legal votes would somehow magically end up with these left-wing organizations embedded in cities like Atlanta or Phoenix or Milwaukee or Philadelphia. So these are left-wing organizations hiring left-wing Antifa-type operatives to deliver these votes in the middle of the night. I don't somehow think that these are likely to be Trump votes. So I don't think it's a big leap. Now, what Catherine Engelbrecht said, which is true, is that as a clinical matter, you cannot go back and retrieve those votes. Why? Because when a mail-in vote comes in, it comes in an envelope, and the only name and signature is on the envelope. So the moment that you take the ballot out of the envelope, you've separated the two pieces of evidence and they can't be reconnected. So that's what she was referring to by saying that in that sense, you can't go back and sort of reverse engineer the process.
Yeah.
So and I think that,
let me raise a point. I want to raise a point because Jason brought up minutes ago here this idea that in some states it's of course permissible to bring a family member's ballot, for instance, to the ballot box, and that would be perfectly legal. And so as I'm watching the film, I'm thinking, okay, you don't want somebody who's doing the right thing, who's just carrying their family member's ballot, to be caught up in Dinesh's film and kind of being the subject of this accusation. But the way that you seem to sort that out, Dinesh, in the movie, that as best I can tell, and obviously as you lay out, is the only people who show up on camera in your movie, you say, are people who visited many ballot boxes. So I have questions about that. When you say they visited many ballot boxes, do you mean in the very same night, or do you mean over the course of many nights in the lead up to Election Day, for one?
I mean both. So for example, the data that True the Vote purchased was from October 1 through Election Day. Right? Mm-hmm. And in Georgia, they purchased data for the runoffs as well. So what you have is you have some mules on a single night going to 12 drop boxes in 4 different counties, in a sense, running a kind of mailman's route, but not to US post boxes, but to mail-in drop boxes. Now, that is necessarily a deliberate act, right? There's no accidental way to go to multiple drop boxes. And that's why they set the bar kind of high. Because if you set 2 drop boxes, there could be some eccentric reason that you happen to tie your shoelace at the second drop box.
But why is it important to visit multiple drop boxes? If this is a criminal scheme, what's the importance of actually visiting multiple drop boxes to put these ballots in?
The purpose is this: if you went to a single drop box and you dropped in 200 votes, the next morning, the election officers will open that drop box and they're supposed to make a chain of custody document counting the number of ballots in those drop boxes. So there will be a massive spike in this one drop box, immediately creating suspicion. So the mules are instructed 3 ballots here, 5 ballots there, 10 ballots here. That's the reason for the rules.
It's like in Shawshank Redemption, when they're digging their way out, they got to put the dirt in the pants and then spread it all over the prison yard. They can't just like drop it in one spot, or else they'll be, everyone will be onto them. And then one other element here that I really have a question about, and that I kept thinking throughout the movie. You show video of like people like hilariously trying to put ballots in and dropping them all over the place. It's like there's like some great footage. It's government footage. But I was waiting to see video of the same person at a different location doing it again. And I didn't see that in the film. I was hoping that there'd be, oh my gosh, there's the same exact guy at a completely different location dropping ballots into boxes. Do you have video footage like that?
Well, let me tell you, we don't. And let me tell you why that is. Because the states were notoriously delinquent in installing this video. In other words, the election rules call for it. It's right there in the guidelines. You need to have surveillance video. The cost of surveillance is very low. There's surveillance all over the country in parking lots everywhere, right?
Right.
But we were, by the way, at great difficulty able to extract a considerable amount of video in Georgia, some video in Arizona, some in Michigan. In Wisconsin, they said we'll do it, but they didn't. Even in Georgia, it's very spotty. So here's the problem. Let's say the mule is Dinesh. You can follow Dinesh going to 12 drop boxes, but there's only video on one of them. There's Dinesh, sure enough, just as the geo-tracking shows, Dinesh turns up, you can see him dropping the ballots, but then you go to the next drop box, whoops, no video. So our problem arises not from our lack of diligence, but from the scarcity of video, which I'm confident you would see if they had done their job and established proper surveillance video everywhere.
So that actually leads me to 2 questions. One is kind of a minor one, and one is a larger one. So I just want to clarify, these ballots, there's no claim that these ballots were somehow fake or somehow manipulated. It's just that these people were collecting them and taking them for money to these different drop boxes. That is the claim, correct?
No, I think you're making the opposite assumption. You're assuming that there is some way in which nonprofit groups, which are, by the way, forbidden from electioneering, somehow got their hands on hundreds of thousands of legal, legitimate votes, and then, for reasons unknown, paid these mules and said, guys, you do it at night, make sure that you wear a hoodie, make sure that you wear gloves so you don't leave your fingerprints. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
So that's my second question, and that is about the gloves. So, there is that video, which actually wasn't from the 2020 election, I understand. That was actually from 2021, from the runoff in Georgia. So some of this, it's based on the 2020 election, but some of the video isn't from the 2020 election. And that I found that to be a little, questionable. But at the same time, let me just ask this question, and
Jason, for what it's worth, that's not a point they conceal in the movie. They say it outright.
No, they do. They absolutely say that. That's how I know. It's not like I went and investigated that.
Let me add a thought, if I may, which is that it's actually very useful to have geo-tracking from the runoff, because you can see the same mules who operated in the election returning for the runoff. So, and in fact, you can see the same mule not wearing gloves in the beginning and wearing gloves after the time when there were arrests in Arizona due to fingerprints. And then apparently the word went out, guys, you got to wear gloves, because otherwise you're going to get busted. So, what makes a story credible is when the details kind of fall into place. And so, sure enough,
Dinesh, you have video of the same exact mule not wearing
Yeah,
gloves?
I don't recall. Was that in
No.
the film?
I'm just asking. I'm asking. You do
Yeah,
have
yeah.
video
No,
of that?
I am too. I don't
Yeah,
think I recall that in the film.
I'm gonna look in our archive for that. You know, you're right. We only show the mule wearing gloves, and this was, I believe, from early January. And we obviously have plenty of video before the arrest where they're not wearing gloves. But whether we have a video of that same woman not wearing gloves, I'm gonna check.
Okay.
Yeah. That was because that I think would change a lot of this because
that would demonstrate that she wasn't just COVID scared.
Right.
It would be like something changed. Something changed.
Yeah, you stole my question here. I mean, there are people who are still spraying down their groceries, and there are people who didn't really have a full understanding of how COVID was how you transmit COVID. She was also wearing a mask in that too. So this could have been a COVID person, a person who was really afraid of COVID to touch
let's remember, A, there was no one else around.
Yeah,
and remember, B,
but if you think it, but hold on, Dinesh, if you think it's that something that you touch will give you COVID, then you're gonna wear gloves for the drop box. You know what I mean? So that's why I think it could have been, a COVID fear. And I'm not sure that it's established. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying it's not really established that this was not a COVID person who's freaked out about COVID. And it was specifically so that their fingerprints wouldn't be detected. Because I would assume that there are a whole lot of fingerprints on a Dropbox. You know what I mean? It would be pretty difficult.
Let's look at it this way. If we were discussing right now a criminal case, there would be an obvious remedy, right? In other words, you got these mules, we have their cell phone IDs. Every cell phone has a distinctive ID. So True the Vote doesn't have the names of the 2,000 mules, but they have their cell phone IDs. Right. So if law enforcement steps in, all they have to do, and it won't be hard to get a warrant here, you basically unmask the mules, you have their names, and you go talk to them. That's kind of the next step I would call for after the movie, because if you go talk to the mules, see, we can't do that. I don't have the authority to show up. But the cops do. And what they do is they ask the mules, hey, listen, were you paid? How much? Who paid you? Who put you up to it? Who gave you those ballots? And the investigation proceeds from there. I'm not trying to solve this problem judicially. I'm just pointing to the logical next step that I think needs to happen.
Well, as an investigative journalist, you could do that. You could show up and say, hey, if you have the evidence of who they are, as an investigative journalist, you certainly could ask them questions.
What I was saying is that if you have a cell phone ID, as a private individual, I don't have the authority to get their name. Basically, the authorities will go to the cell phone provider and go, who's this guy? And they'll go, well, it's Dinesh D'Souza. That's the way it works. Law enforcement has they do it every day. I mean, look, if there's a murder in a park and there are 5 cell phones that are tracked in that park, they unmask those people, they go interview them. They're probably all going to be suspects. It doesn't mean they all did it, but maybe one of them did it.
Dinesh, you mentioned at the outset that this is an unusual movie, given the difficulty you have in distributing it. Certainly the topic is controversial itself. Can you explain the evolution in your thinking about this since the 2020 election? A lot of people have made claims of a stolen election. They pointed to all sorts of things, including voting machines themselves being manipulated. And I noticed one of the things you do actually take some time out to do in the film is speak to conservative pundits who work with you as well at Salem to kind of get their impressions. And the truth is there's a range of impressions about what occurred in the 2020 election. And they all look, I think, they take this new evidence you bring to them and they're all very surprised by it. What's the evolution in your own thinking about this issue?
Well, I was very distressed in the immediate aftermath of the election. I think, like a lot of people, sort of smelled a rat. But on the other hand, I recognized early on that a number of the claims that were made about fraud didn't meet the high standard that you had to meet. In other words, they were episodic, not systematic fraud, or they were anomalies. An anomaly is something that's odd, but odd things do happen, and odd things sometimes have an adequate explanation. So as a result, I kind of went silent about that issue for over a year until I saw the findings of True the Vote. And then I realized, well, this is a different caliber of evidence, because this is, first of all, it's using common sense, right? By which I mean the rules changed around COVID. Suddenly all these mail-in drop boxes, suddenly tens of millions of mail-out ballots. So the hypothesis was that if there's going to be cheating, isn't it likely that the fraudsters would go to where the vulnerabilities are? So in this movie, as you know, we don't deal with machine swapping or the Chinese. I just set all that to the side. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm not saying it did. I'm just like I'm focusing on one type of fraud where I think that there is legitimate evidence that should be considered. And I think even a skeptic, even Jason, even a skeptical guy who doesn't believe it is going to go, there's something here. There's something here that warrants a much closer look. I don't think it's possible to leave the theater and not have that view if you see this movie with an open mind.
To all of our listeners with an IRA, a 401k, or other retirement savings, have you seen the headlines today? Our federal debt has now reached over $30 trillion. What the federal government is not saying is that the Fed is running out of ways to fight our growing debt bomb. Inflation and tax hikes may be their only way out. We all dodged a bullet when Senator Joe Manchin announced that he wouldn't support the Democrats' crazy Build Back Better plan. But the truth is, the Democrats may not give up so easily. That is not good news for hardworking American taxpayers. Whatever the Democrats do in 2022 may mean even more and higher inflation. The more the dollar comes under attack, the more physical gold and silver could protect your money. So if you have over $50,000 or more in your retirement savings, your money could be at risk. Learn how you can protect your life savings with physical gold and silver. Call 855-948-1605 to receive your wealth protection kit. That's right, call 855-948-1605, and Goldco may give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open a qualified account. That's why Goldco is the only company we recommend for gold and silver. Goldco is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, a 5-time Inc. winner, and has countless 5-star reviews. So, what are you waiting for? Call 855-948-1605. That's 855-948-1605. Call Goldco and get started today.
So I guess, and I'm trying to phrase this question the right way without sounding like I'm trying to get into a rumble here. But I'm trying to figure out a way to say this. And I'll say it because, being familiar with you and being familiar with your work in the past, and even some Black conservatives who I respect, some of whom I know, like Bob Woodson and Glenn Lowry, who I don't know, but I certainly respect his work, even if I disagree with it, have left organizations like AEI because of some of the things that you've written in the past. You were a supporter of birtherism at some point, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
That's not correct. I never supported the birther idea. My point is that Obama's ideology was imported from his father, which is what he says. Not that he was I never said that he was born in another country.
Okay, that's fair. I'm glad you cleared that up, because there are sources out there that say that you were one of the proliferators of the birther conspiracy. I didn't know that for fact, but that is out there. So I just want to say that. With that, do you think that some of that, in addition to, as Vince mentioned, and maybe more so, some of these people who have put forth some really wild conspiracies, the Lynn Woods of the world, and the what's the woman, Sidney Powell, and the My Pillow guy, and things that really aren't even plausible. Do you think that hurts your case and your credibility with this, and that people aren't, people who like me are skeptical about this whole thing, but are, would be willing, if there's real evidence of voter fraud, would be willing to take a look at it? Do you think that those people, I believe that people like Seb Gorka, who I know is going to watch it and be like, hey, I'm all for it. But do you think that maybe people in the center and people certainly on the left are going to dismiss it because they're like, this is another attempt at, throwing something against the wall and hoping it sticks?
Well, let me address the 2 points because they're separate. I published a book in 1995 called The End of Racism, which did generate a lot of controversy. Tom Sowell said it was the most important book since Gunnar Myrdal's An American Dilemma. And I was very puzzled that Glenn Loury, kind of a hero of mine, broke with AEI and resigned over my book. Now, I want to be clear. I don't know if you've been following Glenn Loury's statements, but of late he said, Glenn Loury, was going through some incredible personal difficulties. And he goes, I wanted to endear myself to the liberals. And I knew that if I bashed Dinesh D'Souza and I resigned from AEI, I would be welcomed with open arms on the left. And for about 10 years, Glenn Loury pivoted to the left. But then he goes, this was like swallowing a frog. I couldn't take it. I'm sort of back in the conservative camp, which he is now. So I think when you put the statements in context, you realize that this is a very odd situation with Glenn Loury. I'm not going to try to resolve it here. I just want to point people to the fact that Loury himself has admitted that the famous break with the right was motivated by a lot of personal considerations. By the way, I'm also very close. When I was at AEI, to Woodson. I talked to Bob Woodson. He goes, listen, I haven't read your book, Dinesh, but Glenn Loury called me. He goes, I'm basically Glenn Loury's sidekick on this. So this was a regrettable episode in my life. I was in my 30s when all of this happened. Let's just put that to the side. Your second point is actually, I think, a legitimate one, which is, and it dismayed me and made me more reluctant to get in this topic, which is lots of people have sort of queered the field, as they say, which is to say there have been some outlandish theories that have been put forward, and it's made it more difficult to put legitimate arguments. And so I tried to solve that problem and people all, these days are like, Dinesh, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Don't you think that why do you think they stopped the counting? And I'm like, listen, I don't know why they stopped the counting. I don't know why a bag appeared in Atlanta. I'm not trying to address any of that. I would like people to quote, forget everything you think you know about voter fraud when you see this movie. Just keep an open mind, keep your eyes open, and connect your brain to your eyes, and I think you'll come to the correct conclusion.
I think to add to the point that you're both making here is that also Donald Trump's lawyers didn't prevail in court so many times in the wake of the election. And as a result, I think there's been people both on the left, certainly on the left, because they're like, okay, this is stupid, Biden's president, and people on the right who are fearful of engaging this topic for fear that they will be, quote, canceled, or pick your term. So that they look back at that and go, man, even the guy whose future was at stake couldn't prevail in court. So there have been quite a few appointed
judges too. That's
quite a few people have taken that conclusion and said, okay, for that reason, let's move on with this topic. But you're saying, like, look, if there's a pile of evidence in front of me that certainly looks like the American people deserve to know about it, I'm going to share it.
Well, I mean, look at any other context, right? Let's say there's a crime, and let's say for whatever reason, there is a 2-month window in which you have to absolutely prove the crime. And if you don't, the statute of limitations expires, and in a sense, legally, nothing can be done about it. But DNA evidence emerges later that this guy did it. Don't you think it's valid to present that evidence and say, listen, whether or not we can do anything about it now, whether or not the legal window is closed, it's really important on an issue of this significance to know the fact of the matter. So I don't think in that sense the movie needs a justification. Its justification is it's a truth-seeking inquiry.
Yeah. All right. Well, the movie is 2000 Mules. It is, as I said at the outset, a provocative look back at the 2020 election. Dinesh D'Souza and the team at True the Vote come out with all of this data showing the cell phone patterns of people going around American cities. They show you government video footage as well. They synthesize it together and they present it in, as Jason pointed out, a very well produced film package. And you can see it at 2000mules.com, and it comes out May 7th of this year. And there'll be basically endless ways for people to get access to it. Right, Dinesh?
Yeah, it's not going to be the normal places like Apple and Amazon. It's going to be on uncancelable platforms. So Salem Now, which is the Salem media platform, but also the Rumble, which is the video platform, has a platform called Locals. So on the Rumble-owned platform Locals, you'll be able to digitally download the movie and watch it. Yeah.
I hope people talk about it. That's the key. And just have the conversation. If you hate this movie, let Dinesh know and give him specific reasons why. I think that's a good sign. Thank you, Dinesh. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah,
sir.
we certainly appreciate you discussing this film with us. And And, like I said, I have some skeptical thoughts, but I definitely appreciate the fact that you're willing to sit here and discuss it with us. We're a left-right show, and there are some people who are afraid to come on our platform, both on the left and the right. And we appreciate you.
Guys, I've genuinely enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on, and check out the movie at 2000mules.com. That's the place to look for 5 different ways you can see it.
How about it? Thanks, Dinesh.
I hope you'll come back. Thanks a lot.